ask you about some other concepts related to this issue. For example, the failure to include state terrorism in the definition of terrorism, or that conflict. Also, how the notion of self-defense has been redefined, and Bush's notion of preemptive war or preventive war, and also the redefinition of torture. I can't remember the name of the professor from Harvard, the law professor who was redefining torture.
His name was Yu.
You, John, right? Yeah.
Yu, yes. John Yu. John Yu.
He was, but there was another one from Harvard. It started with
Alan Dershowitz?
Yeah.
Dershowitz.
Well, the United States has a statute that violates fundamental principle of international law and the fundamental
Ramsey?
principle. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just going to move it. We do have people out in the world watching this, so if we just come so they can hear you over
There's a
here.
little mic on here that's
Yeah,
quite
so if you
sensitive.
could just
Yeah, sorry, sir.
right here.
Yeah, you can,
Right here.
The
the mic's in.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
first purpose of the United Nations is to end the scourge of war. The first principle of the United Nations is sovereign equality of nations. And the U.S. has a statute that authorizes the Secretary of State in totally secret proceedings to designate an equal sovereign as a state sponsor of terrorism. And, if they're so designated, the consequences internationally for them are enormous, including liability in U.S. courts for conduct they are alleged to have committed that injured people, and cutting them off from participation in all international commerce and aid. So what we have is discrimination in state terrorism by definition, by permitting the Secretary of State. And, it doesn't have to be, there's one for organizations as well as for states. For instance, the Tamil Tigers were designated. But what you do is you select your enemies, you designate them state-sponsored terrorism. And then to show how totally lawless it is, when it becomes to our advantage to withdraw them, we do so. We had Iraq on the state-sponsored terrorism, and about 29 Americans who were taken hostage in January of '91 and held for 7 months, sued Iraq, recovered a judgment of $980 million, which is absurd, because it's designed to bankrupt the country. And the judgment was final. And then the United States looked at it, and they withdrew the designation of Iraq because they realized that all of our aid going into Iraq would be converted into paying less than 30 members of the U.S. establishment there. They avoided their judgment. So here's the only principle that protects the judiciary from erosion of its power by the Congress and the President is the principle of the finality of judgments of courts. If you litigate all these things, it's not final. The President can say no. We need to give pardon without putting the pardon mark. That's the exception for criminal conduct, the conviction. Then the judiciary has no real power because it can be altered by. Anyway, that's the state sponsor of terrorism is the vast majority of all terrorism.
Ramsey, anybody in the world right now, you have one of the great overviews of the lawless situation that we're all in. You've seen the system from totally inside as Attorney General, Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States. You've looked at it now from the outside. You were involved in the trials of Saddam Hussein, Milosevic. My sense is you really have a great distaste for these show trials and the abuse of law to advance these political agendas. So I'm hoping that we can get a sense today and in the next couple of days of how what we're doing in Calgary here fits in terms of other initiatives, how we can put these initiatives together in a coordinated way. In California, I met Charlotte Dennett, who ran for Attorney General of Vermont, having read Bugliosi's book and then calling him into Vermont to try to follow this advice that Bugliosi gave. Bugliosi is saying, let's do a domestic murder trial on Bush. This whole question of criminality and how we conceive of the huge level of lawlessness and organized crime at the highest level that makes Al Capone, Chicago look puny by comparison. I'm thinking about the crime involved in these PR agencies that sell us war, that in Kuwait get the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador in the United States. Hill and Knowlton hires her to say, yes, we saw the soldiers of Saddam Hussein take a baby and throw this baby from an incubator on the floor. Completely fraudulent event meant to contaminate our minds, twist our minds. The whole way 9/11 has been spun is leading to religious warfare, contamination of our minds. We know in Germany that you had to go through a period of using the media to dehumanize those who are about to be targeted for mass extermination. So the way 9/11 has been played by the media and the public relations agencies, surely there's a huge amount of criminality involved in that, involved in twisting people's minds in Calgary so they don't see when George Bush comes to town what the deeper issues are and things are trivialized. So anything you can do to help us to see how our little efforts here and our efforts to get a bigger picture of things, you with probably in the whole world one of the great overviews of the real depth of the dilemma that we're in now and the failure of our laws and this much lauded rule of law and democracy and voting and all of these things.
Well, I think the basic need is to realize there are no easy solutions. The only hope really is the involvement of millions and millions of people. It's hard to call it a system, but there's a situation that's deeply entrenched. And without a major uprising, change is unlikely. We had an interesting experience with impeachment. It was clear that you see what people think are important. You see they impeach Bill Clinton for what? If you try to impeach George Bush, and we spent a lot of money, worked very hard at a grassroots effort to enlist people and sending letters to the House of Representatives for impeachment proceedings for the removal of the President of the United States and other high officials. It has to begin. And then a trial in the Senate after a successful impeachment. And it was like, it was heavy lifting. It took months to reach 1 million. We reached about 1.2 million before the end of the administration. Once he left the government, impeachment was out of the picture, then the prosecution was, you can't prosecute a sitting president. You have to impeach him first and remove him from office, and then you can prosecute him, or his term expires and he no longer has immunity. But I think unless at the grassroots, classrooms, and the families at home with their children, moral leadership, and